The music didn't stop all at once. It simply faltered, a violin string catching on a sour note just long enough for every guest to turn and stare. My cheeks burned, not from embarrassment, but from the sting of my father's hand. In that one moment, surrounded by laughter, shimmering glasses, and the scent of roses, I learned how quickly celebration can become judgment. My name is Alexis Monroe. I'm 31 years old, and 5 minutes ago, at my brother's wedding, my father slapped me in front of 200 people. Some moments change your life forever. This was mine. I wish I could tell you I shouted back or made a scene, but I didn't. I stood there, shock running through my veins, tasting the sharp metallic tinge of blood on my lip. My mother's eyes darted not to me, but to the faces watching us, her hands trembling with worry about appearances rather than pain. My brother Ethan, still in his spotless tuxedo, sat beside his new wife and smirked as if all this drama was nothing more than entertainment. Not a single person stood up for me. Not a single person asked if I was okay. Minutes earlier, my family had pulled me aside near the dessert table. The request was simple, they said. Be reasonable, Alexis. Ethan and Anna need a home, your home. The penthouse I bought with overtime hours, missed vacations, and dreams no one but me had ever believed in. I said no calmly and directly. I was tired of being reasonable only when it meant giving something up. Suddenly, I was selfish. Suddenly, I was the problem. And so, in front of the people I once called family, I became a stranger. As I turned to leave the ballroom, heels clicking against cold marble, I felt something shift deep inside. Not a break, but a settling, a kind of quiet determination I'd never known before. No one followed me. The air outside was sharp and cold, but I welcomed it. With every step past the valet and the floral arch my mother had obsessed over, I realized I was finally stepping out of their expectations, and maybe into my own life. Tonight I want to tell you a story, not just about betrayal or family, or the pain that sometimes comes from those who should protect us most. This is a story about boundaries, about claiming your own worth when the world tries to convince you otherwise, about how one moment of humiliation can plant the seed for a lifetime of courage. If you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated, or asked to give up more than you should, this is for you. Because sometimes the moment they try to take everything from you is the moment you discover how much you truly have. Before we begin, let me ask you, have you ever been pushed past your breaking point by the very people who claim to love you? Have you ever walked away from a room or a life and wondered if you'd ever belong anywhere again? Stay with me. I promise this isn't just a story of loss. It's about the freedom found on the other side and the unexpected power in choosing yourself. Let's begin. Growing up in the Monroe family, I learned early what it meant to be the reasonable one. I was the quiet fixer, the dependable older sister who never made a scene, who did what needed to be done so others could shine. When Ethan forgot his science project, I stayed up gluing cardboard volcanoes long after midnight. When our parents fought over money, I learned how to mediate, smoothing over words before they became wounds. You're so mature for your age, Alexis, my mother would say, as if being strong was a compliment and never a burden. It didn't stop in childhood. In high school, when Ethan crashed our family car, it was me who took the blame because he was already under so much pressure. In college, while he partied through his classes, I balanced part-time jobs and full course loads, quietly wiring money home when Dad's business was slow. My victories, good grades, scholarships, job offers, were treated as expected. Ethan's smallest effort was celebrated. I didn't question it then. I thought sacrifice was what made me worthy of love, that being reasonable was the same as being valued. Real life, of course, proved otherwise. After graduation, I landed my first job in Seattle, starting out with a cubicle, a borrowed laptop, and a stack of student loans. I saved every spare dollar, skipping out on weekend trips and new clothes. Ethan. He jumped from one startup to another, always confident someone would catch him if he fell. Mom and Dad never let him hit the ground, and I never let myself ask why they didn't do the same for me. At family dinners, the pattern repeated. My stories faded into the background while Ethan's filled the room. There's a strange loneliness in being the reliable one. Friends see your competence, not your exhaustion. Family assumes you're fine because you always have been. One Christmas, Ethan showed up late, clearly hungover, and spilled wine on the carpet. I cleaned it while my parents hovered over him with concern. "He's going through a rough patch, Alexis. Be supportive." No one asked how my year had been. It was like being the scaffolding that holds up a house, essential but invisible until it cracks. I realized that some families don't praise your strength. They depend on it until you disappear. If you've ever felt like your best was never enough, you're not alone. It's easy to believe that love must be earned through sacrifice, that the more you give, the more you matter. But the truth is, there's no medal for becoming the solution to everyone else's problems. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no. I wish I'd learned that sooner, but life has a way of teaching us in its own time. That winter, while Ethan bounced between jobs and our parents debated how to help him next, I quietly made a decision. I wanted something of my own, something that wasn't just survival, but a piece of proof that I could build a life on my terms. That's how the dream of my own home began, a place where I could finally rest just for me. But building that dream would take more than just saving money. It would mean rewriting what family meant and finding the courage to choose myself for once. And that, as I would soon learn, was both the hardest and most necessary lesson of all. My journey toward owning a home began not with big dreams, but with small acts of self-preservation. After years of being the steady hand everyone relied on, I longed for a corner of the world that was mine, quiet, safe, untouched by anyone else's demands. It started simply opening a savings account just for myself, telling no one. Each week, even if it was only a few dollars, I'd deposit what I could. That money became a promise to myself, a daily reminder that I deserved a future shaped by my own choices, not by anyone else's expectations. There were no shortcuts. I worked late hours at the software companies, sometimes picking up freelance projects on weekends to pad my income. My friends spent their paychecks on concerts or new restaurants. I spent mine on rent, groceries, and that growing savings account. On lonely evenings, I'd make lists, places I wanted to live, features I dreamed about, a window that faced the sunrise, enough shelves for all my books, and a front door no one else held a key to. It wasn't glamorous, but the slow, steady work of building something for myself gave each day meaning, even when exhaustion set in. The first time I visited an open house, I felt out of place among couples holding hands and realtors eager for big commissions. I walked through apartments too expensive, too dark, too loud, reminding myself not to settle. It took nearly 3 years before I founded a sunlit penthouse at the edge of Capitol Hill. The walls were bare, the floors creaked in winter, but when I stood at the window overlooking the city, I felt a rush of pride and peace I'd never known. I signed the paperwork with shaking hands, then called no one. It was a victory I wanted to savor quietly. People sometimes ask what homeownership means to me. For many, it's just a transaction. For me, it was proof. Proof that I could provide for myself, that I could make a plan and see it through even if no one cheered me on. On moving day, I unpacked my boxes, slowly arranging every picture and pillow with intention. I sat on the floor with takeout noodles and looked around, realizing I didn't have to ask permission or wait for approval. I was finally home, not because anyone gave it to me, but because I built it brick by brick. Looking back, I wish more people talked about what it really takes to create a life on your own terms. It's not just about saving money or finding the right apartment. It's about reclaiming your own narrative day after day, choice after choice. Sometimes what you build isn't just a physical space, but a new sense of who you are and what you deserve. The more I made that space my own, the more I started to see how different my path was from Ethan's. He never understood why I worked so hard, why I didn't ask for help. But the answer was simple. I needed something in my life that was truly, unquestionably mine. Little did I know that Penthouse would become the battleground for a family war I never wanted to fight. The boundaries I'd set would soon be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. As much as I had learned to build for myself, I was about to learn what it meant to protect it too. And that lesson would be far more complicated than simply writing a check or turning a key. Every family has its patterns, some spoken, some silent, some so woven into daily life that you stop noticing until the cost becomes too high. In the Monroe house, Ethan was the golden child. He had charm and easy confidence, always knowing the right thing to say, always catching the best light in family photos. I was the steady shadow behind him, the older sister, who made sure his homework was done, who reminded him of birthdays and college deadlines, who never complained when attention naturally gravitated toward him. Sometimes it felt easier to disappear than to compete. As we grew older, those roles didn't change, they just grew up alongside us. Ethan jumped from one big idea to another, always certain that his next startup would finally take off. When things fell apart, and they often did, my parents rushed to cushion the blow. "He's just figuring things out, Alexis. He'll get there, you'll see." I heard that line so many times it echoed in my sleep. When my own milestones came, a promotion, a finished side project, even buying my penthouse, they were met with polite nods or a quick shift back to whatever Ethan was struggling with that month. There's a strange kind of hurt in being invisible, especially when you've done everything right. I remember one Thanksgiving when I shared news about a new job I'd worked so hard to get. My mother congratulated me, but by dessert, the conversation had turned to Ethan's latest business pitch and how much stress he was under. No one asked me questions, no one lingered on my excitement. I tried not to take it personally, but over the years, small slights like that add up, leaving you quietly questioning your own value. What hurt most wasn't the lack of praise, but the sense that my struggles didn't count. When I faced layoffs at work or battled loneliness in the city, I kept it to myself. I had been cast as the strong one, and I didn't want to disrupt the script. Sometimes I'd wonder if I ever really needed help. Would they even notice? It's a hard truth. But some families are better at rescuing the person who stumbles than noticing the one who keeps marching forward quietly, carrying their own burdens. Looking back now, I realize it's easy to become so good at surviving that you forget to ask for what you need. The danger of being the invisible sibling is not just that others overlook you, but that you learn to overlook yourself. That Thanksgiving, as I watched my brother take up all the space in the room, I promised myself I wouldn't let my life shrink to fit the expectations of others. It was a silent vow, but a powerful one that set me on a course to fight for my own light. Of course, family roles don't dissolve just because you recognize them. They fight back. And when the time came to truly defend what I'd built, to say no for the first time and mean it, I found that invisibility can turn into strength. I didn't need to be the loudest or the favorite or even the most loved. I just needed to be seen by myself. But setting boundaries would come at a price, as I was about to find out. And the battle to hold my ground was only just beginning. That night at Ethan's wedding, as the cold air stung my cheeks, I felt both emptier and heavier than I'd ever been. All those years of being reasonable, of keeping peace and carrying burdens, had finally reached a breaking point. I remember walking down the steps outside the ballroom, feeling my hands shake, not from the slap, but from the enormity of what had just happened. In that moment, the line between keeping the family together and losing myself altogether was suddenly painfully clear. Sometimes it takes public humiliation to push us into private reckoning. I ended up at the only place in Seattle where I ever truly relaxed, Java Harbor, a cozy cafe that stayed open late for night owls like me. Chris, the barista, and an old college friend took one look at my face and simply handed me a mug of chamomile tea without a word. We sat in silence until my heartbeat settled, the noise from the wedding still echoing in my mind. I told him everything, even the parts I usually edit out: the exhaustion, the guilt, the endless request to be reasonable. He listened, really listened, and for once I didn't feel invisible. Talking to Chris was like holding a mirror to my soul. He asked gently, "If you're always the one making sacrifices, when do you get to live your own life?" It was a question I'd avoided for years, pushing it aside in favor of family harmony. But as I sat in that quiet corner, I realized that self-respect isn't selfishness, it's survival. We're taught to be selfless, especially as daughters and sisters. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is draw a line and defend it, no matter the fallout. A few days later, my mother called, her voice tight with disappointment. "You know how much this would mean for your brother. Why can't you just help like you always do?" I felt that old tug in my chest, the urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to give in just one more time. But instead, I took a deep breath and said, "No, Mom, not this time." The silence that followed was deafening, but also strangely freeing. I hung up and cried, not from regret, but from relief. For the first time, I'd chosen myself. It's easy to believe that saying yes makes you loving, and that saying no means you're letting everyone down. But the truth is, boundaries are an act of love, both for yourself and eventually for those around you. In that small act of defiance, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. I learned that protecting your peace can look a lot like disappointment to others, but to your own heart, it feels like finally coming home. What I didn't realize was that standing up for myself would unleash consequences I hadn't even imagined. Families don't always accept new boundaries gracefully. Mine certainly didn't. As I braced for what would come next, I promised myself one thing. Whatever happened, I would not go back to being invisible. I would not give up the ground I'd finally claimed, not for anyone. And with that vow, a new chapter quietly began to unfold. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, almost hollow. My phone lit up with messages, some pleading, some angry, some disguised as concern. But I didn't answer right away. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I called my bank and added new layers of security to my accounts. I met with a real estate lawyer to make sure every document for my penthouse was airtight. It felt foreign at first, all this protecting and planning, but it also felt good. For the first time in years, my energy was spent building walls, not patching up cracks others had made. Late one evening, as rain tapped against my windows, I started reading about financial boundaries. How many women, even in America, find their assets entangled in family expectations? Stories of daughters pressured to co-sign loans, sisters guilted into sharing inheritances, mothers drained by just one more favor. It was eye-opening and honestly comforting. I wasn't alone in this struggle. I learned the language of saying no, clear, calm, firm. This is my home. My answer is final. I wrote it out, rehearsed it, let it become part of how I spoke to my family and to myself. I also began quietly preparing for what might come next. I moved my most important valuables to a safe deposit box at the bank. I made a list of trusted friends and set up regular check-ins just in case things got messy. Chris checked on me every few days, offering support without pressure. When anxiety flared, I'd walk along the waterfront, letting the salty breeze remind me that the world was bigger than any single conflict. Each small action built a sense of security layer by layer, like patching together a quilt from scraps of hard-earned peace. What surprised me most was how quickly my family noticed the change. Without my usual compliance, they scrambled to find new ways to reach me: guilt trips, social media posts, calls from distant relatives. Each attempt reminded me why these boundaries were necessary. It's funny how rebellion can be so quiet, no yelling, no slammed doors, just the persistent refusal to give up what matters. I saw that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as soft and steady as the heartbeat that carries you through the hardest days. If you've ever been the person everyone turns to, you might worry that boundaries will make you seem cold or uncaring. But here's what I learned. True caring doesn't mean sacrificing yourself endlessly. It means honoring your own needs so you can show up whole, not hollowed out. Self-preservation isn't selfish. It's the foundation on which a better life and healthier relationships are built. As I quietly reclaimed my independence, I couldn't help but wonder if my family would ever accept the new terms. I knew resistance would come, but I no longer feared it. I was done living in reaction to their wants. For the first time, I felt not just hopeful, but ready for whatever truths and trials might lie ahead. And as it turned out, the next secret I uncovered would shake the very foundation of what I thought I knew about my family. Sometimes the truth sneaks up on you quietly disguised as routine. It was a rainy Saturday when I found myself sorting old emails searching for a utility bill. That's when I noticed an odd message, an old shared document Ethan once begged me to review for his latest tech project. Curiosity led me deeper. The more I scrolled, the more I recognized my own work lines of code wireframes, even full interface designs I'd once shared to help him. But the credits had vanished. In their place were his initials and the family company logo, bold and unashamed, as if I had never existed. The shock didn't stop there. I stumbled across financial records hidden behind password-protected folders Ethan must have thought I'd never find. There were odd payments to shell companies' invoices for consulting fees, and a long chain of transfers, linking back to my father's business accounts. The pattern was unmistakable: money moving in circles, never resting anywhere long enough to be questioned. What began as sibling rivalry now looked like something darker: financial misdeeds that reached well beyond family squabbles. I sat at my kitchen table, heart pounding, realizing I'd uncovered the kind of secret that could upend more than just dinner conversations. The temptation to confront them all at once was strong, but years of being the cautious one had taught me patience. I quietly reached out to a lawyer, Rachel, explaining what I'd found and asking what it all meant. She listened carefully, then confirmed my suspicions. If this went public, Alexis, it could mean legal trouble for everyone involved. Suddenly, I was torn between protecting myself and exposing the very people who had raised me. Was speaking the truth worth the chaos it would bring? Did loyalty have a limit? In the days that followed, I struggled with what to do. I replayed childhood memories, birthday parties, family trips, holidays when we all felt whole. I wondered how the people I loved could cross so many lines, justifying it as helping the family. But the lesson became clear: silence only enables wrongdoing. If I looked away now, I'd become complicit in the same secrets that had cost me so much. The time for being invisible was over. Sometimes loving a family means holding them accountable, even when it breaks your heart. If you've ever found yourself burdened by a truth no one else wants to face, know this. You are not responsible for the mistakes of others, but you do have the power to choose integrity over comfort. Doing the right thing may feel lonely at first, but it's how real change begins, both for yourself and for those who come after. Steeling myself for what came next, I realized this was more than a battle for a penthouse or peace of mind. It was about protecting the values I had spent my life quietly building. As I prepared to confront my family, I knew there would be no turning back, and that maybe for the first time I was finally ready to be seen, even if it meant risking everything. When the time finally came to confront my family, I didn't storm in with accusations or demands. Instead, I invited my mother to my apartment, a quiet Sunday afternoon sun filling the living room. I offered her tea, and we sat in the same chairs where she'd once fussed over curtains and criticized my choice of paint. My heart raced as I opened my laptop and gently turned the screen toward her. "I need you to see something, Mom." On the display, emails, code, transaction logs, and proof of everything I'd discovered about Ethan and Dad's financial trail. At first, her expression was confused, then frightened. She tried to change the subject, shifting blame. "You know your brother always meant well, and your father did this for the family." But I didn't flinch or look away. For the first time, I told her clearly that things could not continue as they had. "This isn't just about money," I explained, voice steady. "It's about trust, about boundaries, and about what's right." I told her I wanted peace, not revenge, but that peace would require real change. No more demands, no more secrets, and no more guilt trips disguised as love. She wept quietly, caught between denial and heartbreak. I understood. Her whole life had been about holding our family together, even if it meant hiding truths or excusing harm. But this time, I didn't step into the old role of comforter. Instead, I held space for her sadness, but I did not let it become my responsibility. It was the hardest conversation we'd ever had, but also the most honest. I saw her vulnerability for the first time, not just as my mother, but as a woman afraid of losing everything she knew. The lesson was clear: boundaries are not punishments. They're an act of respect for yourself, and even for those who hurt you. Setting them is not about shutting people out, but about letting the right kind of relationship in. I told Mom I wasn't threatening to destroy the family. I was refusing to let old patterns destroy me. For the first time, she seemed to see me not as a caretaker or peacekeeper, but as a grown woman, flawed, determined, and unwilling to trade self-respect for acceptance. After she left, I stood by the window watching her disappear down the street, unsure if she would ever truly understand. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was strong. I felt lighter, freer, even as uncertainty lingered. Family change doesn't come all at once, and it never comes easy. But sometimes it only takes one person to say enough to start breaking the cycle. I knew that my words would send ripples through every relationship I had. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was learning that drawing a line isn't the end of love, it's the beginning of something new. And as news of my stand spread through the family, the consequences, painful, necessary, and transformative, were just about to unfold. After that conversation with my mother, the world seemed quieter, but somehow heavier. There were no dramatic fights or slammed doors. Instead, there was distance, a new and unfamiliar silence growing between us. Ethan stopped calling, no more late-night messages about his next big idea. My father, usually a presence in every family discussion, simply withdrew, attending only to his business, letting the weight of his choices settle over the household like dust. Even my mother, who had always managed to keep everyone in orbit, grew softer, more hesitant. The Monroe family, once so tightly wound, was slowly unraveling. The consequences played out in subtle but significant ways. Ethan and Anna moved out of their apartment after missing rent for 2 months, unable to rely on family support that had always been there. My father faced tough questions at work when rumors of financial trouble began to swirl. Family friends, once eager to attend our barbecues and birthdays, kept their distance, not wanting to choose sides in a conflict they only half understood. I felt both grief and relief, knowing that the scaffolding I'd helped hold up for years was finally coming down. Not with a crash, but with a quiet, steady creak. It's a strange thing watching a family transform, especially when you're the one who forced the change. There were nights I lay awake questioning my resolve, wondering if I'd done the right thing. But in those moments, I'd remind myself of all the times I'd felt invisible or used or shamed for wanting something of my own. Change, I learned, almost always looks like loss at first. But sometimes it's the loss of what was never truly yours to carry that makes room for new growth. The grief was real, but so was the growing sense of freedom. During this time, I leaned more than ever on the friendships I'd built outside my family. Chris would invite me for walks by the harbor, listening as I worked through my feelings, never judging, only encouraging. I joined a community book club, started cooking dinners for friends, and found myself laughing, really laughing for the first time in years. I realized that chosen family could be just as meaningful as the one you're born into, maybe even more so. The warmth and acceptance I'd searched for all my life began to take root, not in my childhood home, but in the small rituals of daily connection. If there's one lesson I wish I could give to anyone standing where I stood, it's this: healing doesn't mean everything gets put back together the way it was. Sometimes it means letting things fall apart, giving up the illusion of control, and allowing yourself to grieve what was lost. Only then can you start to build something real, something lasting from the pieces that remain. As I looked forward to the next chapter, I felt ready, not for a perfect family, but for a life that finally felt like my own, shaped by courage, honesty, and the quiet power of starting over. The first dinner I hosted in my penthouse wasn't about proving anything. There were no formal invitations, no anxious cleaning for critical eyes, just friends' laughter and the soft glow of city lights pouring through tall windows. Chris brought homemade bread, others brought their favorite dishes, and together we created something new, a family built on kindness, respect, and genuine care. As we raised our glasses, I realized that home isn't made by architecture or ownership. It's built from the moments we choose, the people we trust, and the boundaries we honor for ourselves and others. Looking back, every chapter of this journey taught me something crucial. I learned the cost of being the reasonable one and the deep loneliness of invisibility. I learned that building a life on your own terms takes more than money. It takes courage, discipline, and a willingness to disappoint those who would rather keep you small. I faced the pain of drawing lines with those I loved most, and the heartbreak of watching old roles fall away. But I also discovered the unexpected peace that comes when you stand your ground and finally say, I deserve better. If you've ever felt caught between loyalty and self-respect, or wondered if it's selfish to want more, know that you're not alone. Boundaries are an act of love. Speaking the truth, even when it shakes the foundations of your world, is how real healing begins. Sometimes families do fall apart, but it's in those cracks that new light enters. Chosen family, self-acceptance, and honest relationships are waiting if you're brave enough to step into the unknown and let go of what was never really yours. Tonight, as the city glimmered beneath my balcony, I felt a quiet gratitude for every trial, every heartbreak, every lesson. The road to self-worth isn't easy, but it's worth every step. I hope my story helps you find your voice and your boundaries, and reminds you that home can be wherever you choose to claim it. We don't have to wait for permission to become the heroes of our own stories, we just have to begin. If this journey resonated with you, please subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me, what boundaries have you learned to set, and what does family mean to you now? Your story matters too. Let's keep this conversation going and build a community where everyone is seen, heard, and truly at home.